Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. My guest today is the co-author of this wonderful book called 72 Reasons to Be Vegan and lots of other books. His name is Gene Stone. I'm meeting him today for the first time. Welcome him to the show. We travel in the same circles, but they've never intersected.
I was just going to say, it's so amazing that we actually have never met before, because we must know, what, maybe 2.5 million people in common?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I don't have every book you've written, because you've written over 50, but I think I have every book you've written in the plant-based space. So
I don't have every book I've written.
Well, how did you write over 50 books? It took me over 50 years to write my first book. I mean, how can you be so prolific?
OCD, just.
I mean, that's just an incredible accomplishment, and so many New York Times bestsellers to boot, but just the volume of books you've written.
Yeah, I started off as a book editor. I did newspaper editing and magazine editing, but I didn't really like editing. I always wanted to do a little more. And at one point I got fired from my last job, and I thought, well, Gino, this is like, a sign from the universe that maybe I shouldn't be working 9 to 5. But I still had that very strong kind of, I don't know what you call it, negative work ethic, that you work from 9 to 5, and so I think that having worked in an office and a very, very intense offices, I developed this idea that you really work that way. Most writers I know who started writing before they did anything else, they tend to work maybe 2, 3, 4 hours a day. I just work more hours and wore myself out doing it, but it was rewarding for me too. And a lot of what I started doing was ghostwriting, and that meant working with other people. And so a lot of times it actually wasn't even my schedule anyway. If I was working with somebody who was really compulsive about getting stuff done, I didn't really have a choice. I was dragged along with them.
When you say ghostwriting, does that mean your name is on the book or isn't on the book? Because I always get confused when that happens.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there isn't a definitive answer. There's ghostwriting, which I conceive of as being by somebody, and often, in fact, I have to sign confidentiality agreements saying that I'm not even allowed to mention that I worked on this. Some ghostwriting, you actually do get to have maybe acknowledgement someplace, and some ghostwriting, your name can go on it. But then there's also co-authoring, where like I did this wonderful book with Michael Greger, How Not to Die. It's by Michael Greger with Gene Stone. Sometimes I do a book like the one you mentioned with Kathy Freston, and that's a book where we did together. And then sometimes I write under my own name. So it's really all over the map. But yeah, I would say that for the most part, ghostwriting often means that your name doesn't even go near it.
Do you think like most celebrities write their own books?
I would think that 0 celebrities write their own book. And in fact, I don't want to go. I was a book editor for years, so I know a lot about the way book editing works. And every once in a while, there'll be some big news about some celebrity who's written his or her own book. And what that usually means is there may have been a writer, but we'll never know. But you also have to remember that if it's a big celebrity, they'll turn in a manuscript that, yeah, maybe they wrote themselves, but for the most part, it was rewritten by the actual editor at the publishing house. But I will say, I take back the 0. There are a few celebrities, frankly, who did turn out to be really good writers and probably did do it all themselves. It's not completely impossible. It's just unusual.
Yeah, because I find writing a book a very arduous process, which is why I've written so few. And all of my books, well, except for ones that are straight up cookbooks, I didn't need help. I have a his name is Glenn Mercer, and he's helped a lot of people. But I really did write the book. He just kind of made it better. You know what I mean?
No, I've seen Glenn's name on a lot of books. I don't know him, but he must be quite good, because I see that a lot of really great people have chosen him to be their help in all of this.
Yeah. Well, like when I write, I write like I talk, which is prolific and like a lot of words. And it's like, so what he did, because he's not really an editor, he kind of chiseled away and got rid of the superfluous stuff and then, punched it up. So, I mean, he made an enormous contribution, but I want people to know I really did write my own books. He just like improved them.
I always say that if I've done a really good job when I'm doing ghostwriting, then somebody should say to that person, hey, why did you even need Gene? This book just sounds like you. The better the ghostwriter is, the less intrusive his work seems to be.
Yeah, that's neat. Well, not all your books are plant-based though. And that's what I really want to know, Jean, because I love your story. We love to know how our guests got onto a vegan or a plant-based diet. I've done over 600 shows now, and except for maybe the 4 guests that I've had vegan from birth, everybody has a story, and yours is kind of unique, I think.
Well, it's unique and slightly embarrassing because, sometimes you go on these panels and you talk to people and they became vegan because of their extraordinary love of animals, which is beautiful. Or they've been in the medical profession for so many years and they really wanted to help. Mine was more about money. It was what happened is I got a phone call from one of my agents saying, I think I have a book deal for you. There's this guy in Texas. He's a firefighter, and I think you should do a book with him. And I said, I really not that I'm a New Yorker, and I don't know about this, firefighter in Texas. And he goes, no. This guy is cool, and he's vegan. And I'm going, oh, vegan? And yeah, vegan, whatever. So I get on the phone. This guy turns out to be a guy named Rip Esselstyn. And I'm thinking, I don't know how this is going to work. But by the end of the first hour, Rip and I have totally bonded. I don't know if your audience knows Rip, but
of course, yeah, he's been on the show. Absolutely, everybody.
Yeah, sure. But the most extraordinary thing is not only are we we're like best buds, we discover that this is going to sound like a digression, but it isn't. In 1970, my mother had breast cancer, and back then, male doctors, routinely just took breasts right off. There wasn't much going on. My mother, who was a very strong woman and rather vain, basically said that she would kill herself before she lost her breast, and she meant it. She had stockpiled pills. She was going to go. So she is ready to kill herself until she discovers this doctor in Cleveland, the first doctor in America who was willing to do a lumpectomy. In other words, just take out the lump from the breast. So she works with that doctor, and it works. My mother was cured. Well, that doctor was Rip's grandfather. So Rip's grandfather saved my mother's life. So when we figured that one out, we knew, wow, we really need to work together. So I started working with Rip, and if you know Rip, he's just like the most enthusiastic vegan that ever lived. And so within a week, I'm going, yeah, if I'm going to write a book with you, obviously, I'm going to have to at least try this. And then not only did it take, but this was at a time when Brian Wendell was about to do Forks Over Knives. And he already started it. So I met Brian and I said to Brian, we really should do a book with this, which shouldn't just be a doc. Let's do a book and a doc simultaneously. So that got me into working with Brian. I wrote the Forks Over Knives book. Through that book, I met Gene Bauer. I said to Gene Bauer, we have the same first name. We should do a book together. And then it just took off from there.
That's incredible. It's like they say 6 degrees of separation, and that you already had a connection with him. What did you think about veganism before your meeting with Rip? Is it something, did you think about it at all?
Oh, sure. I mean, I've been writing health books for years. I've been working with different doctors in integrative medicine. And I did a book with the medical directors of Canyon Ranch. I did a book with Dr. Andy Weil's mentor, Robert Fulford. I'd written many magazine articles. So I was very aware of diet and its impact on health, but I hadn't come to the degree of, compassion, or even understanding all of the health ramifications of an animal agricultural based diet. So when Rip started explaining it, I thought, yeah, this is interesting, but it kind of contradicts maybe 10 other books I've written. And you want your books to be at least fact-based and reliable. But I'm pretty open-minded, and I thought, I'm willing to give it a try. This was maybe 2005. And if I don't know, you're probably not old enough to remember 2005, but in 2005, going vegan was really tough because it just hadn't hit the culture the way it has in the last few years. So my friends thought I was, had an eating disorder, or there was something wrong with me, and it was kind of difficult. But because I was so lucky to have Rip as a coach, it was a lot easier for me than it was for a lot of other people.
Did you go whole tofu overnight,
I
or
went
did you
cold tofu
transition?
right there. And again, it's I don't look when Kathy and I have been talking about 72 reasons to be vegan. A lot of what we talk about is not going that way, not just like starting from scratch and just saying, okay, today I'm vegan. We talk about crowding out and how if you put more vegetables and fruits and legumes and whole grains into your diet, you'll find that you're eating less animal-based agriculture. But in my case, no, it was like 1 minute I was not a vegan and the next minute I was a vegan.
That's pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah,
I think I think a lot of people, it is that way for them once their eyes are open and when they're ready, you know?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. You have to be ready. In other words, if you're not ready and you're just sort of thinking about it, then you just slowly increase the healthy food into your diet and you get rid of animal agriculture. But if you really are ready, and Gene Bauer tells stories. Gene Bauer at Farm Sanctuary tells wonderful stories of people who've gone to Farm Sanctuary, just been so moved by what they saw, and boom, just became vegan right there and then.
Yeah, I think when the ethical piece is in place, it's harder to, not to go all the way, because it's like if you're doing it for health, you could say, well, one such and such won't hurt me, but ethically, it's kind of harder to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then, as you know, the pillars of veganism are the ethical pillar, the health pillar, and then there's also the environmental one. And what I do find is that when I'm talking, I have to judge the audience I'm talking to. If I'm talking to people, let's say 40, 45 and older, I would stress health. But when I'm talking to people 30 and under, I stress the environment. And for a lot of them, it's the same thing as you said. They feel strongly about the environment. They are switching to non-animal agriculture, but then they might say, well, this one fish isn't going to hurt anything. It's the people who really have that ethical feeling, the compassion for animals, who, every time if they were to eat something animal, oh my God, I've hurt that animal and I feel so bad.
Why do you think more people don't have that piece? Because I recently had Dr. Silas Schro on the show. He's the climate change doctor, and he said something like only 3% of the world's population is vegan. That's kind of a vegan. It's kind of a dismal amount, don't you think?
Well, it is quite dismal. The two things there. The first part of your question, why don't people get this? It's the thing that makes me craziest, and it's the thing I think about the most, and I worry and I wonder, and I wonder, is there a switch in some people, or is there like a on off? I don't know. If I could figure that out, if any of us could figure it out, it would be fabulous, and we'd have a much better world. But we can't yet. But as far as the 3% figure goes, I still think that's better than the 1% it was maybe 10 years ago. I just met these guys from Israel. Have you heard of Vegan Friendly?
No, but I'd love to have him on the show.
Vegan Friendly is a terrific organization. This guy, Omri Potts, he's Israeli, obviously, and this organization has done more for veganism in Israel. I don't know if you know, but Israel is, I think at this point, the most vegan country. When Vegan Friendly started, 1% of Israel was vegan. It's now 5%. And most of that credit goes to these two guys. So I do think that if each country, you could find people like this to create these, the organization is wonderful, and I will talk to you more about it later. I really think you should have them on your show, because in part, they've started a branch in the United Kingdom, and now they're about to start one in America.
I would love to, that's fabulous. And what kind of strategies did they use? How were they able to accomplish that?
I'm still learning about their organization, but they're very smart. They do everything they possibly can. They work with corporations, they work with individuals, they schedule events, they have parades. They did a very famous billboard about a lamb being slaughtered that was touchy, but really convinced a lot of people to go vegan. So what they try to do is figure out every single possible way they can think of to do what you said before. How do you get people to flip that switch?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this book, 72 Reasons, who's buying this book, Gene? Is it mostly people that are already vegan, people that are veg curious? And is it working?
It is certainly working. As to who's buying it, we don't really know, because there's no way of doing that kind of market research. But the book was written, I mean, if you're vegan, you kind of already know this stuff. But, so many of us who are vegan, we have all of our friends and our relatives going, why? And what are you doing? And why are you even this way? So what we're trying to do is we wanted to write a book for vegans to give to their mother, their father, their boyfriend, or their girlfriend, or their kids, or whoever, their dog, if their dog can read, just to get them to know, yeah, there are a lot of reasons. And again, we cover health, we cover animal protection, we cover the environment, and the other pillar, the newest pillar of veganism, which is athletic competition. Because all of these athletes are discovering that a vegan diet is a great way to improve their performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always think of the top, at least in my mind, the top 3 reasons people become vegan is ethics, their health, or the environment.
Yeah, but I think athletic competition is now a fourth one. You have so many professional athletes who are doing it. You have all these Olympic guys. You have, both on the professional and the amateur side. And as far as the triathletes, I think there are probably more vegan triathletes than there are non-vegan triathletes now.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because I became vegan for ethical reasons over 44 years ago. And listen, I'm glad when people become vegan, but it's kind of always makes me sad that the ethics isn't the reason. It just seems like it's a feeling human that would be kind of at the top of your list more than like winning a sports event.
This is what you said before. It's not that people aren't vegan are cruel or mean or anything at all. It's just that at some point, for some people, there is some switch or something gets turned on that the wonderful compassion and the warmth and the love that people have extends further beyond the boundaries of humans and extends to living things. And so how do you get that to flow from, again, wonderful, I mean, some of my closest, most wonderful, loving friends are not vegan. And I love them, but how do you get them to move that sense of empathy and compassion over to other beings? And man, if I could figure that one out, I would be the happiest guy on earth.
Yeah, that's something. Well, I love all your books. I mean, it's funny. I just have them all, the one with Jean, the one of the forks over knives. That was a great idea, by the way, because you came up with that idea to have a book in conjunction with the movie.
Yeah. I've done that a few times where it's very helpful for documentary to have a book at the same time because they're synchronistic. People read the book and they go see the documentary. People see the documentary and then they read the book. But I've also done just on another front because I've done several what we call instant books. Many years ago, I don't think this is a big surprise. I'm a liberal Democrat. And when Bush was about to be reelected, I called up a friend at Random House and said, I'm so afraid this is going to happen. Can I write a Bush survival Bible? And they said, if you can write the book in a week, we'll publish it in a week. So they gave me 1 week to write the book, which I did. And then the book came out and then sold like 150,000 copies in a couple of weeks. So then when Trump was elected, felt pretty bad, did the same thing. I wrote a book in a week, came out, was a bestseller. So weirdly, I'm not the deepest person, but I'm a very quick person.
That's amazing, though, to write a book in a week. I mean, that is incredible. So how many books have you written in total now?
Well, I say 50, but it's kind of like I've lost count.
So, like when I've asked other authors this, or even chefs with recipes, I ask them like what their favorite, they go, well, that's like picking your favorite child. But in reality, we know that parents always have a favorite child, whether they admit it or not. But do you have one book either that is your personal favorite that you wish people would read, or maybe one that you're most proud of?
Yes, I do. Some years ago, about 4 years ago, I wrote a novel with my friend John Doyle called The Awareness. And the awareness is a fable about what would happen one day if all animals got human consciousness. And then, of course, what happens is they go to war against humans because they're so angry at what happened. So it's the story of a dog and a bear and a pig and an elephant. And each of them has a story about how they react to suddenly having this human consciousness and the war that ensues. So yeah, I love this novel. And in fact, I'm working with a friend who works at Netflix. We're trying to see if we can turn it into an animated movie.
I was just going to say that sounds like a great movie. Is this book available on Audible? Because I don't really read, but I listen.
It isn't. I had a really hard time convincing New York publishers who aren't really always in step with the world to do this. And so I ended up doing it through CreateSpace, and we've never gone and done an Audible version of it. Obviously, if we go ahead with a movie, then we would do that. But if you don't, I'll tell you what, I'll read it to you.
Well, okay, that sounds great. I'm already thinking in my head who the voice actors could be for the animals. Did you write this book before you became vegan or after?
No. This was what I'd been thinking. It's what we're talking about. It's what we're always talking about at some level, all of us. How do we make more people understand what veganism is and go vegan? And what I've been thinking is I've been writing all of these nonfiction books, and I'm proud of all of them. I really am. The Gene Bauer Farm Sanctuary, or Mercy for Animals with Milo Runkle, How Not to Die with Michael Greger, Animal Kind with Ingrid Newkirk. I'm leaving out some. There are plenty of others. But I also believe that the way to convince people to change, to wake them up, is actually through stories. So I really wanted to find ways that I could tell a story so that it wasn't nonfiction. It wasn't like, a footnoted, documented book, but it would be fun to read. So the idea was then, what kind of book could be a novel that might get people to understand some of these issues? So that's how that came up. I really am incredibly proud of it. And by the way, I'm working on another novel right now. There's also kind of an animal-based novel. And again, hoping that when people can read it and think it's just a lot of fun, but maybe they'll also read it and maybe it'll change their mind a little bit.
Well, it's not that hard to make a book on Audible. Either you just click the little button and then somebody records it for you.
I just haven't done it. I should, because you and many other people have said that.
No, because I just don't. I had a TBI, and I just can't read anymore. I just can't. I can, but it's difficult. So that's why I prefer the books to be listened to.
Well, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I should do this, and now I will do it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I can help you. I do that all the time. I've recorded 2 books. I did one of my own, and then I did one for Dr. Lyle and Goldhammer, The Pleasure Trap. It's quite easy.
But can I take a second to ask you? Literally, you just push a button and you start recording?
Well, okay. If you're doing it yourself, no, it's you go into a studio and there's generally a director. But if you choose one of the actors that are already in the queue, like you could listen to a sample, it's really quite easy. And I can hook you up with Glenn, who he always picks actors to do his. It's really that easy. But if you're doing it yourself, no, you have to be. I have to be directed. I don't want to just. Be
I do not want to do it myself. I do not want to read my whole book out loud.
But I think it'd be fabulous, because the animals will have different, because whoever the voice actor is, he or she will do different voices for the different animals. And, I already think like John Leguizamo for like the elephant, please, I'm already casting your book in my head, but I think that would be amazing if it was an animated feature.
So after the show, let's chat about that. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, how there's like an old joke in Hollywood, actors like say, but I really want to do is direct. You've written a lot of nonfiction books, but is your heart really in the fiction? Is that what you really enjoy?
Yeah, it is actually. I think the nonfiction books are important, and not denigrating them at all. They're great. I think the people I've worked with are people I'm really, really, I just feel thrilled that these people allowed me to work with them. But I do think that at this point in my life, it would just be more fun, more interesting. And again, I just feel that, like with Uncle Tom's Cabin, probably did more to convince people of the evils of slavery than any pamphlet that was coming out at that time. Not The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. A good novel, if it really is good, can change people's minds in ways that I don't think that nonfiction can as much. So yeah, what I've been thinking about for the last 6 months is just story. What are the stories you can tell so that people don't feel they're being lectured? They don't say, these are facts that you have to know, or you're a bad person if you don't do this. How do you do something that's entertaining and just makes them feel like, oh, this is really great. And oh, maybe if they're really paying attention, they hear the message. But they don't even have to. Like Animal Farm is one of my favorite books. You can read Animal Farm and just think, oh, a really fun story about animals. It's really sad, bad things happen. Or you can actually go a little further and realize this is a condemnation of fascism. But not everybody gets there, probably.
Were you a voracious reader growing up?
Oh, man. Yes, I was. I read and read and read. I mean, I still am, although not to the degree. Well, my mother was a writer and my father loved books. And so I grew up in a household where it was more important. A lot of, a lot of kids were being told, go outside and play. I was like, go inside and read.
That's hilarious, actually. Do you think it's a lost art now? I mean, are people still reading books?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that happened during the pandemic is that book sales actually went up. So it reversed a long-standing trend of books. But all of a sudden, when the pandemic happened and people didn't have as much to do, they started reading again. I'm hoping that took. There's no question people don't read as much as they used to, and that the book industry, which used to be a much more powerful industry than it is now, has faded somewhat. But I think people still read. And as you know, if a book, important books can still change the world and have a real impact. And I think that's not going away. And YA books, young adult books, that field is actually doing really well. A lot of people thought, oh, well, video games and phones, iPhones and smartphones, kids aren't going to read anymore. But it turns out kids really like the opportunity to see words and really beautiful pictures and hear stories and have their parents read to them. So if you can get kids to read, which is happening, they take that habit with them pretty much through their life.
It's funny, Jean, because I'm in my 60s and I like to listen for reasons, but otherwise I like to actually hold a book in my hand. I cannot stand Kindle or ebooks. I can't stand them. And people are always like, please write an ebook. And it's like, why do I want to write something that I wouldn't even want to buy? Because it just, I hate reading on a screen. A book is, you're supposed to hold it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I have a Kindle, and sometimes if I travel, the advantage of a Kindle is you can put 10 books on it, and then you don't have to carry 10 books. But at home, I never, ever use Kindle. You're right. I mean, again, this book, we had it packaged exactly like this. So it's easy to carry, easy to read. And, there is something just really fun about it. Because to me, you won't be able to see this, but I'd like to write notes in my book and little reminders, and I star and I put little Post-its on it. And you just don't really do that with Kindle in the same way.
Yeah. And you can't sign a book to somebody,
Oh, I never actually thought about that. I was at a book reading yesterday and I signed 40 books. You're right. I could not have signed a Kindle there.
Which book was it for?
72 Reasons to Be Vegan.
Nice. The funniest thing happened to me. Oh, and actually the person is actually watching live. Her name is Linda Middlesworth. She's the premier vegan in Sacramento. So my first book, my first book that came out 10 years ago, I would sign it, to people. And many years later, I was at the True North Health Center and working, and somebody asked me to sign the book. And I opened the book. And it was a book I had signed to her son years ago. The person bought it off of one of those sites cheaper. It was hilarious that happened, because that inscription was in there. So anyway, pretty funny. Yeah, that is funny. What did you think of the book? Well, the book and the movie Fahrenheit 451, and no books were allowed to exist.
That's actually one of my favorite books of all time. It's also, it's a really short book. It's only about 50,000 words. And yet, that's Ray Bradbury, who is definitely one of my favorite writers. And he packs more entertainment value and mission value into that book than almost any other book. It's an extraordinary book.
Do you have a favorite author?
Oh, I've got a lot of favorite authors. I mean, I went to get a PhD in English, so I lean on the sort of academic side. There's an author named Marguerite Yourcenar who wrote Memoirs of Hadrian and The Abyss. She is one of my favorite writers. God, man, there's so many writers I like. That is a tough one. The Way of All Flesh by Samuel Butler was one of the most influential books in my life. But I also like Ray Bradbury. I like really good science fiction. I love the book Dune. When fantasy is really good, it can be great. Yeah, I mean, I would say at my bed table right now, there's maybe 15 books on a stack waiting to be read. I can envision this as like the end of my life, is like
Oh my God.
spending the rest of it just sitting there with books and reading, and
There's
that's kind
nothing
of
like
like,
reading a book in a hammock
yeah, absolutely.
with
Although
your dog, with your little doggy laying
I
with
was
you.
gonna say you have to have an animal there too.
Absolutely. I had a fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Kerr, and she used to say, if you wish to be a great writer, write.
It's funny. That's exactly what I say to people. People say, I really want to write. I love writing. And I said, well, do you write? And they go, well, no, I don't write yet. And I go, no, you just need to write. You could write for years only for yourself, or you write in a journal. But the only way you really become a writer is by writing, and writing a lot, and writing as much as you can. It really is the answer.
Because a lot of people come to me because they want to have a book in the plant-based space, and they come for advice. What advice do you give people? If they even ask you? I don't know.
Oh, they ask. It depends on who they are. If they're a well-known doctor or a leading advocate in this area, I usually ask them, do they have the time? Do they have a book idea that differentiates from other books? And usually, I recommend finding someone else to do it with them, because the collaborations we talked about could be really rewarding for both people. If it's somebody who just has a really interesting idea and they want to write it themselves, that's a tough one, because the market's already saturated with so many books on plant-based diets and plant-based living. It really is a matter of having a new idea and being able to be, a good writer. But mostly I told them exactly what you just said. Write it, see what happens,
Hasn't publishing changed a lot, though? Because I have friends that have written books and they've been dropped by their publishers because they don't have a big enough social media following. And it's unfortunate that you could be a wonderful writer and have wonderful recipes, but now it's all about the numbers.
It's all about the platform. That's what publishers want to know. They want to know, what's your social media platform. Interestingly, going back to the fact that book sales rose during the pandemic, it was actually book sales of well-known writers that just skyrocketed. And the reason that so many more books were sold is that books by people that readers already knew really took off. Unfortunately, books by new writers did not take off because there's almost no way for these people to get publicized, to get attention. And so it was really tough for them. Publishing has changed a great deal. And I started in the late 1970s. Publishers would talk about, is this an important book? Do we want to publish this? This is good for our brand, for our image. Like most things, it became corporatized. I remember there were maybe 25 publishers, 30 major publishers when I started, and now there are basically 4 or 5. And they're all very corporate, which isn't to say there are some very good people left in publishing. But the other problem publishing is having is that if you graduate from college now, you want to go work for Google or Microsoft, or you want to go work for a hedge fund, or maybe you want to go work at TV, or you want to do streaming live something or other. Whereas 30 years ago, publishing was a very viable place for smart kids to go. Now, it's really not happening. Smart kids are not nearly as likely to want to go into books as they are into the drivers of our social life.
How do you feel about self-publishing? And do publishers not like self-publishing? Is it sort of like YouTube? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Because
sure. Publishers are mixed about self-publishing. When it first started, they laughed at it. But the fact is, there are a lot of really good books and a lot of good writers out there who just simply don't have the access to publishers. You have to have the right agent. The agent has to have the right contacts to the publisher, and the publisher has to really want to do the book. And so at first, self-publishing just seemed like vanity publishing. But then what happened is a number of books actually did really well in self-publishing. And so publishers began to realize, publishers began to realize that there were some terrific things out there. So some publishers like Simon & Schuster actually set up their own self-publishing division. Other publishers actually go through BookScan and look to see if there are books that are doing really well, and they may offer those people a contract so that I can't remember the name of it, but there was a science fiction book several years ago that I think sold something like 500,000 copies self-published because it was a really good book and the guy who wrote it really knew how to market it. So now you've got this kind of symbiotic relationship between publishers who still say that, of course, what they do is the only important part of publishing, but they also realize that they need self-publishing because it's kind of like a farm league for them. And so a lot of times they'll pick up these books and find that they sell really well and add to their bottom line.
Yeah. Well, what I like about it is it gives people a chance that might not otherwise have a chance to get a book published, and maybe they'll be successful, maybe they won't, but at least they get a chance.
The Awareness, this novel that I'm going to say again, the title of The Awareness, it was self-published and it ended up selling, 3,000 or 4,000 copies, which for first novel, even by a major publisher, was pretty good, but it's still selling. And if you go on Amazon, you'll see good reviews and people are posting and talking about it. If it weren't for self-publishing, that would never have happened. It just simply would have never appeared. Yeah. Furthermore, I give it to people like this person I know who now works at Netflix, and she's seeing if she can try to make an animated movie. If I hadn't self-published it, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's wonderful. I'm curious, how long has now been that you've been vegan, Gene?
15 years.
Did you notice any difference in anything, your health, your mental health, your physical health, your athletic performance?
Yeah, I won a few gold medals at the Olympics. Well, I've always been a pretty healthy guy. The big thing for me was that my family is one of those families with really high cholesterol levels. Like my mother's was 350, my dad's was over 300. And my cholesterol level was about 250 and it went down to 200. That's not the best level ever, but in my family, that was like amazing. And that happened within a month. Other than that, again, I've always been a healthy guy, but I did find, not in terms of health, but in terms of just my life, is I felt so much better about the way I interacted with other beings, with other animals. I could look any animal in the eye and say, I will never eat you, I will never hurt you. And I really do believe, and I hope this sounds all right. My heart grew, my levels of compassion grew. By understanding what we were doing to animals, I also think I became more compassionate toward people. I just think, my heart just got to be bigger and better. And I felt better about myself.
Well, I believe that 100%. So what kind of stuff do you eat? Are you much of a cook?
Oh man, I wish I were you.
No, but I don't even cook. I mean, this is the thing. I know how to do it, but it's like the cobbler's kids have no shoes. Right. I know it, but honestly, if I can't put it in the microwave or the Instant Pot or the air fryer, I don't eat it's embarrassing, really. Frozen rice from the freeze. I really eat really simply.
Oh, well, I am not much of a cook. I do try now and then. My major foods are steamed vegetables, I'm going to have steamed artichokes for lunch. But the other thing is that, my breakfast is actually pretty intense because I wouldn't even remember everything I put in it. I have different kinds of granola, hemp seeds and chia seeds and flax seeds and goji berries and probably about 8 other ingredients. Every superfood that Michael Greger ever mentioned ever goes into my morning cereal. And then I put blueberries and raspberries, and strawberry. I mean, there are probably more antioxidants in one bowl of my cereal than I ate in my first 20 years of my life. But for the rest of it, but the other thing is, I moved to Los Angeles partly a year ago because Los Angeles is such an amazing vegan paradise. Where I live on Alfred Street, I have Pura Vita to the north, I have Crossroads to the east, I have Real Food Deli to the south, and I have Gracias Madre to the west. So I'm right at ground zero between 4 really, really good vegan restaurants. So unfortunately, or fortunately for them, I do take out probably more than I should. But of course, during the pandemic, I felt very strongly about supporting these restaurants.
Yeah, makes sense. That's very interesting. So you're a New York Times bestselling author multiple times. What does that do for you? I mean, like, does that get you more jobs, better jobs, more money? What type of honor is that? Because I know people that are that. It's like they always say that in their signature. Like once they get it, no matter what, like you get an email from it, and it always says New York Times bestselling author.
Well, I tell you what, for me, it was a tool, a very useful tool, because I'd already written a number of bestsellers before I became vegan. And then I was in this extremely unusual place where I was somebody who publishers knew. I knew agent. I'd been in New York publishing for my whole life, and now I'm vegan. So I realized that I could take advantage of this. In other words, a lot of people, remember, this is back in 2005, 2006, when people still didn't know what vegan really was. So I had this great opportunity. So I could bring books to publishers that I think a lot of other people couldn't, because they knew me. And so they trusted me. I'd already performed for them. They knew I was a guy who said I was going to deliver a book in a year. I would deliver a book in a year.
Oh my God, you've delivered 2 books in a week. So
yeah, well, there you go. Exactly. So I had this opportunity, and what I realized was this was my mission now. I had an opportunity to do something I didn't think anybody else could because of just the situation of my life. So I had to take advantage of that. You know, for me not to use my position in publishing to help veganism would have just been a crime. So yeah, being a best-selling author led me to be able to write all of these books. If I hadn't had that a title, then I don't think I could have gotten the book contracts I did and allowed these wonderful people an opportunity to get book contracts.
Nice. Well, you seem very humble about it. You know, that's the one thing about self-publishing is then even if your book does really well, you can never be a New York Times bestselling author if you self-publish.
Yeah, is that true? You can't?
I don't think so. Charles, if you're watching, text me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the case. So who knows?
I think that it isn't the case anymore because that the bestseller list I think has expanded. I may be wrong about this, but
I'll find out. We'll fact check. We are going to fact check on the show. Well, what does it mean when somebody's a Pulitzer Prize winning author? Have you ever won one of those? Do you want to win one of those?
No, never won one of those. Those are you know, awarded in the nonfiction arena to people who've written, you know, books that took them 5 to 6 years or 10 years to write. And so that's a serious kind of journalism. Not that what I've done isn't serious, but it's a different kind of, the books I'm really interested in working with are books that help people live better lives. But even before I was vegan, I was writing books about social responsibility in business or women's issues or gay issues or anything issues, you know, just trying to give voice to people who needed a voice. Those are not Pulitzer Prize winning books. The Pulitzer Prize winning books are the really wonderful, serious books. Like I just read The Warmth of Other Suns, which is an extraordinary tale of the migration of African Americans from the South to the North in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And it's just a beautiful book that took the author something like 10 years to write.
How much television do you watch? I'm just curious because somebody like you that reads a lot, I'm guessing you're not really watching Netflix every second.
You know, the pandemic changed everything. You know, I was not a big TV watcher, but the pandemic happened and now, yeah, I watch TV every day now.
Got any favorites? Anything you recommend? My favorite's Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso was a great show. Oh, complete opposite of Ted Lasso. I'm watching the most extraordinary show I think almost that I've ever seen called A French Village. It's a French show, won every award in France. It takes place in a small French village in 1940, just as the Nazis occupy it. And every season is a different year. So it goes from 1940 through 41, all the way to 47. And it tells the story about how these people deal with the Nazi occupation. Some of them are awful. Some of them are heroes. It's an extraordinary program, and I'm so hooked that I have to hold back. You know,
Is it a Netflix show? Is it a Netflix?
It's on
show?
Amazon Prime.
Oh, I have Amazon Prime. Wow,
Yeah.
that sounds really. I tend to lean towards the comedy, but that sounds very good.
This is not comedy.
Not a comedy.
No,
It's not.
no. I love. Oh, well, the comedy I'm watching right now that's wonderful is What We Do in the Shadows. Do you
I
know this
don't
one?
know about that, but I
It's
love recommendations from my guests.
okay. It's a mockumentary about vampires,
Well, that
and
sounds
they're
great.
hysterically funny. It's a funny, wonderful show.
I do tend to love French everything, and I'm watching a French show called Call My Agent.
Oh, I
And
was just going to say, if you want a French comedy, call
I
my agent.
love
It
those
is
kinds of
great.
things. How was it working with Dr. Greger? Was he on his treadmill the whole time?
Dr. Greger is one of the people I admire most in the world, but he is his own sort. He's sui generis. I've never met anybody else like him, and I never will meet anybody else like him ever again. He's fun to work with. I've never had any problems with the people I work with, particularly if I'm working in the mission-based area, because even if I'll tell you something. Rip, who is like my best bud, I love Rip, his whole family, but Rip and I sometimes would get these horrible fights, and it's like, screw you, and we'd like hang up on each other, but it was always like good-natured. Everybody has their own rhythm. Michael had his own degree of like acting out. Sometimes he'd be angry about something, and you work through it, because the goal isn't to satisfy your ego. The goal is always to make a book that you feel is going to influence people and get them to join your mission. So that's really all that ever matters.
Yeah, that was a great book. And I have the hard copy, but I listened on Audible because it's a very long book.
I'm about to say, how long did that take you to
Oh
listen?
my God, days. But what's great about Audible is you can speed it up a little bit to like.
Oh, you can?
Oh my God.
So people start going like that.
Well, you don't. Yes, absolutely. And that's how I can do about a book with Audible. I read about a book a day, like when I'm walking my dog. It's fantastic having that feature because I do it at 2.0. And I've learned to listen very quickly like that.
Oh.
Well, we love Dr. Greger on this show so much so that we changed our time of 11 a.m. to 10 a.m. tomorrow because he has a webinar at 11 a.m. But he is a Scorpio,
Oh, I did not know that, but that does say something.
Yeah. Well, obviously you're not going to say who, but have you ever had anybody that you just like that they wanted to write with you and you're like,
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Many people.
Wow.
I discovered a long time ago when I worked with somebody, I won't say who, whose work this is pre-vegan, so nobody in the audience would know this was. I loved what he did in his area. And so we started working together, and he turned out to be a terrible person, and I realized that I couldn't do this. No matter how much I liked that person's work, if I wasn't going to get along with them and I didn't like them, that the book would never be a good book. So I'm very careful about who I work with and try very hard to screen people so that, it's not that they're bad people and I'm a good person. It's just that we have to like each other. So if somebody wants to work with me and I want to work with them, what I basically want to do is spend time just being with them,
Right.
talking with them and hanging out with them and learning a little bit about them so I can figure out, gee, are we going to get along, or is this just going to be a disaster?
Right. Well, you sound like you'd be pretty easy to work with.
I think I am.
Well, people that are watching live really love your suggestions for must-watch TV. And Kathleen wants to know, is anybody in your family vegan? And I'm curious if, since going vegan 15 years ago, have you influenced any friends?
Oh, I sure have. My niece, who I adore, she is 25 years old, graduated from Brown about 4 years ago, and she is a definite vegan. She works for the Good Food Institute, Bruce Friedrich's organization. Her boyfriend is vegan too. So yeah, my family is not, I grew up like everybody else, meat, potatoes, that was it. My brother, who I'm very close to, I think he'd rather die than being vegan.
Really?
And my nephew, who's the twin of the niece, he is interested, but I don't think he'll ever get there. But as far as friends go, I have flipped a few people, absolutely.
I love that term, flipped. It's sort of like when vampires, when they bite the human, then they turn them. So in vegan, in vegan we call it flipping. I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, I've definitely flipped. My favorite is I have a friend who is one of the world's great watch repairers. He runs one of the hugest, biggest brands watch shops. Really a science guy, and I've been vegan around him, and he went vegan. And I was sort of proud of myself. And I said, was this because of me? And he goes, well, you introduced me. But the reason I went vegan is I'm so into sci-fi. I realized that if an alien came to this country, to this earth, to our world, and they saw what we did with animals, either they would leave immediately because they'd be so disgusted, or they would take that as permission to eat us. So I felt like I had to go vegan. That's my favorite reason of all.
Nice. Jean, I have a lot of friends. I left LA a few years ago. They're professional actors. And when you can't just act by yourself generally. I mean, that's called a monologue. But like as a writer, do you ever worry where's the next job? Or if something doesn't come, you just sit down and write something on your own?
Absolutely. When I was younger, I don't think I did anything else but worry. I'm now at a point, it's funny how life works. You often don't get what you want until you don't really care anymore. At my age, I'm fine. I would have loved to have been able to say I'm fine when I was 35 years old, but I couldn't, because like most 35-year-olds who are freelancers, all I ever wondered about was, is this the last book I'm ever going to write? Is it over? What's going to happen next? Life is funny that way.
So is writing the only job you've ever had? Writing and editing?
I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I actually went to get a PhD in English, but I dropped out. And then I became a book editor, then I became a magazine editor, then I became a newspaper editor, and then I stopped being an editor. So, yeah.
That's cool. The Peace Corps, well, that's interesting because you weren't a vegan yet. I always wondered as a vegan, I've known people and they come to countries where it would be considered offensive if you didn't eat what they gave you. And I'm like, I couldn't do that. If it was an eyeball or something.
There was veganism wasn't very big in the late 70s, but there was one vegetarian in our group, and she had a really hard time. I remember once going with some of my students to a festival, and as guest of honor, I was told to kill the goat. I didn't do that. I just couldn't have done that. But for me, and I was able to graciously allow someone else to do it, but for me to have not eaten some of that goat would have been considered very rude. Now this of course was, I don't know, 40 something years ago. Maybe things have changed there, but there are countries where I think, it would be very, very difficult. But again, things are changing. So I'd like to think that as the world just evolves, you could probably be vegan almost anywhere.
I recently had Dr. Herman Ponster on the show. He wrote the book Burn, and he lived with the Hadza tribe. And I will always wonder if there's parts of the world that maybe have never even heard of veganism.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, even like the vegetarian, she could never explain to her students what she really meant by that, because she would say she's a vegetarian, and then they would bring her a piece of lamb, because lambs eat vegetables. So isn't that the same thing?
It's like the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Ian's a vegetarian. We'll serve lamb. I remember that.
And look, even as a vegan today, I can't tell you, I'm sure you know this too, how many people say to me, well, you can have free-range chicken, can't you?
Or fish. Yeah, like chicken, fish,
right.
or vegetables. Well,
Right.
I always make sure I'm not ashamed, and I always use the word vegan, because as much as I love Dr. Campbell, I've never liked the term whole food plant-based, because based could just mean anything. Whole food plant-based could mean, 51% plants and 49% animal products.
Right. No, words are powerful. So you do have to decide, because I work with so many different people. I work with hardcore, absolute vegans, and I work with people who are plant-based flexitarians. So for me, it depends who I'm talking to. Personally, I am vegan, and if somebody asks me, I will say I'm vegan. I don't buy clothes that come from animals. I'm a vegan, but I'm perfectly content with people who are making an effort, and if that effort means being 75% vegan or 95% vegan, all power to them. And the more they get to the 75, the 85, maybe they'll get to 100.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people I'm plant exclusive.
Oh, okay. I like that.
I know. I think I made that up. I had dinner once in New York with Victoria Moran 10 years ago. And I said, I don't like whole food plant-based. It doesn't mean anything. I'm plant exclusive.
I love it. And I'm going to borrow it, but I will footnote you.
Please. Thank you. It's interesting because I didn't know you until an hour ago. And I listened to a couple podcasts. I'm thinking, we're not going to have anything to talk about. And yet we had a lot to talk about.
We probably have more.
Yeah, you're delightful, really. I'm just sorry. All the cool people that are now in LA, I left. Where were you the 9 years I was there?
Will you do me a favor? Because I moved here during the pandemic. I don't know many people. Introduce me to somebody.
Absolutely. I mean, you talked about your niece. Now, tell me about the organization she works for. Is that something I'd be interested to have on the show, maybe?
Oh, sure. If you don't know the Good Food Institute.
I don't. The name Friedrich I've heard of, but I'm not
Bruce
quite
Friedrich,
familiar.
yeah. Bruce Friedrich is an extraordinary guy. And Good Food Institute is basically, they're based in Washington when there's actually a non-pandemic and there's an office. And they do the best research on whole food, plant-based diets and veganism. They're a terrific organization. And I really urge you to go to their website. And absolutely, if you can get Bruce, I mean, I'm sure he'd be delighted to be on your show. He is so articulate and so persuasive about the benefits of eating this way. I think that, every time I've talked to him, I've learned something. And I think you would too.
Well, that's what I love about this show, because I always figure it's easier to talk than to type, than to write. Because I guess I'm somewhat of a writer. I'm a reluctant writer. When I was 17, I was set to go to the University of Pennsylvania because I wanted to be a veterinarian, but instead I became a vegetarian. And right before I went, my mom had this party and there was this psychic there. And she said, "You're not going to be a veterinarian. You're going to be a writer." And I'm like, "I'm not going to be a writer. I hate writing. I can't sit down, blah, blah, blah." And then now, all these years later, I actually attended her funeral. I said, I guess she was right. I mean, but I'm a reluctant writer. It's not like I have joy in it, but it is a way to get the information out,
Mm-hmm. I think writing it's difficult. It's very lonely. I mean, you're just sitting there by yourself and you don't really know if what you're doing is any good. So there's a sort of neurotic quality to it because
there's no feedback, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah,
at least
exactly.
with this, people can say you suck, but people are saying, no, they're saying he is amazing. So we're getting feedback.
But you don't really know for like a year if what you've done is any good. So it can really screw with your mind.
Yeah, I bet. And it's bad. And you seem to me like you're a tiny bit of a perfectionist.
Oh, just a tiny bit.
I just get that
Virgo.
feeling. Yeah, I got that feeling. Well, you're amazing. And thank you so much for the work you do. And guys, this is a wonderful book. It's like a little, well, I don't want to say it is like a little book, but I mean,
a little book.
Yeah, it is. It's a big book, but it's a really great book. It's a great starter book for people. And, we have the holidays coming up, and this would be like a really fun, non-threatening gift for them, I think, because you're not shoving down, visual photos of animal abuse to their face. And I love it. I mean, I love the part about cows loving classical music. My first question is like, do they prefer like Vivaldi over Bach? Like, do they know the difference?
I would say that they probably don't really know the difference between the Romantic era and the Baroque era, but I don't think we've done any studies on that yet. We'll work on that one.
Well, you know what they say, if it ain't Baroque, don't fix it.
Oh my.
See, that's the thing about it. I hate about I do stand up, and it's like you do get immediate feedback, and it's not always good.
Stand up, I tell people, because I thought about it too, probably the most difficult profession in the world, because if you're writing, you're not writing well, big deal. Nobody knows. If you're stand up, you're not doing well. It is the most uncomfortable feeling you can ever have.
Been there, done that. But if you can do stand up, I say you could do everything. Well, it has been just such a pleasure getting to know you and talking to you. And we'll talk offline, because I really do. That book sounds extraordinary, even if, I can't wait for it to become a movie, but it sounds like a wonderful story and something that I've often thought about in my mind. Like, I wish animals, like I've always said, I wish the cows would just, like, and it's terrible. I mean, people are going to think I'm a terrible person, but when a deer gets a hunter, I don't feel bad for the hunter. I'm sorry.
No, me neither. I actually think the awareness, I think you're going to like it a lot. I really do.
I love it. And I love you already. Thank you so much. Thanks all of you for watching. Yeah, thank you. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back at 2 p.m. when my guest is Sandra Bueno from Beauty by Sandra. We're going to be doing a makeup show, something a little bit different. And tomorrow we have 2 shows at different times. 10 a.m. is Amy Tano doing chocolate cupcakes, vegan, of course, and 2 p.m. Trina Burton doing beet burgers. Okay, let me ask you a fun question to end with. All right, so you're going to be executed for a crime. Obviously, you didn't commit. What are you going to choose for your last meal?
Oh my God. What am I going to choose from my last meal? What do I would choose? Okay, it's embarrassing. I love French fries. I don't eat French fries much. I don't eat fried food, but I love French fries. With Veganese, I think I would probably just have an order of French fries.
How about an air fryer? I eat French fries all the time, and then there's no fat on them.
Yeah, I got an air fryer. I've been using it, but is it still? Is that healthy?
Yes. Well, okay. I mean, it depends who you talk to. There's some doctors that'll tell you acrylamides, whatever. I mean, honestly, I've never been to a funeral. Anybody that died from acrylamides, it's when you're using whale and animal products. But I'm going to tell you the secret, at least in my opinion, is you cook the potato first, microwave or however you cook the russet or the Yukon Gold, chill it overnight, and something happens to the resistant starch. Then when you air fry it, it's like really crunchy. I mean, I eat it. That's like one of my favorite things. I like barbecue sauce, but air fries, you could have them every day. And yes, are they as healthy as kale? Probably not. But I have an article from Dr. Greger on the safety of air fryers, and I'm going to make myself a note to send you. But yeah, eat them. They're so great. If that's your favorite food, please don't wait for your last meal.
I'm about to say, now I don't have to be executed. I can just go do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
perfect.
Great. It's so fun talking to you, Dean. Take care. Thanks, everybody.